Today, we'll discuss about Dax. Dax is nothing but an expression, a data analysis expression predominantly used in Power BI. So, if you look at this diagram, how the Dax is applied in Power BI, we know that we are getting data and shaping the data and modeling the data and displaying the data in terms of charts, visualization, tables, cards, and so on. So once it is done, then we'll publish the dashboard to PBA services. Nothing but Power BI services. And as we know that a table constructed in terms of rows and column. If you look at a cube, the edges are the dimensions and the cell values of your cube will be your measures. You can look at a rows and column. The intersections between rows and column which point to a measure, that measure will have a numeric value. Likewise, DAX is a formula where you can provide your table name, column name, and the aggregate. That's it. Here, the Power Query, what does it? It import the data so that it connect to your data set or a data source, maybe a flattened file, maybe a database, or some other format. Once you sourced your data loaded into the memory for shaping your data in order to design a report. You can't directly source the data and create a report. Prior to that, you need to shape the data. You need to align the data with your objective of your dashboard. There are numerous way or a number of tables that you can play, that you can shape, that you can connect, that you can relate, and that you can model the data, and then you can produce a report. The DAX you can see predominantly the model the data, visualize the data. The model the data is nothing but how you can relate the data and how you're calculating the measures, whether you are calculating as a summary overall the table or else you are calculating the value on row by row iteration, instead and aggregation. The differences between the calculated measure and the calculated column is with the aggregation wise the iteration. You are summing the value row by row that falls into the iteration row by row that holds a memory. And if you're summing as a whole, that will be your aggregate. So that calculation will be handled on the fly. And the DAX context, you that split it into a row context, the query context, and the filtered context. The row context that we can able to see the data in row in Power in your report. And the query context is nothing but how you're applying your condition. Let's say you are applying filter on the data model. How you can, let's say you have a region, right? When you apply a region equal to east, that's That's called as a query context, right? And the filter context is also you are applying on the data model. The differences is that the filter context, the query context will look into a deeper in successive thing. In other words, if you see the query context, you are directly make use of your slicer and then you can apply it. In filter context, you are doing the same with the help of your Dax query. And you can see a function calculate, which is a Dax function. And in the calculation, you can use your expression followed by the filter. So you can see the filter is nothing but the filter context. As I said earlier, the filter context, that is the one that you are applying in the DAX formula. You can see this is a filter context. And the expression which you can apply, either you can using a, a measure or an aggregate measure. And the filter that you are applying on the your dimension value, let's say product band or the calendar year greater than 200 or may a boolean. And there is one more thing which is called a implicit filter and explicit filter. The implicit filter or the default filter that will do the aggregations at the table level as a whole is a grouping iteration group of values that summed up, and the explicit filter is the one that you are applying a filter on top of a set of category. Let's say if I'm just applying a sum of sales of quantity, then I that comes as a default as an implicit filter. If I'm applying one more attribute with a color, I want the sum of sales quantity of the color green, then this is the filter which introduced by ourselves, so we call it as an explicit filter. The docs context is made up of the row context we discuss about, the query context that we discuss about, and the filter context we discuss about, right? And you can see the row context is clearly visible for us as we see in the table row by row the row data. And the filter context also is a clearly visible as, and we are using any DAX functions or a report filter on the row or a column headings actually. And the query filter is the one which unknowingly we are working with the report but not sure about what about the query filter, which is controlled by your slicer or a page filter or a heading and controlled by your chart or visual filter. That's it. And you can see this again what is about filter DAX function. Here we are calculating the total sales for a large order, which is nothing but an explicit filter, because if you just calculate the total sales, that is implicit filter. Even if you drag that your grouping, and if you drag this total sales, that will split that value and show it by default, and the total will summed up by default. That is an implicit cursor. On top of that, I'm just filtering the large, right? So the order grouping equal to large, I can see the value which get filtered on the overall total, and that corresponding to the grouping as large only, and it ignore the small and the medium here, which is clearly an explicit filter. And you can see we displayed here the page filter, the level filter, the page level filter, and you can see the column level filter, the row level filter, the slicer, and the visual, right? As I said, the slicer and visual, right? You can see slicer, the page filter, right? The visual. You can see, right? Slicer, visual, and the page filter. These three are your query filter, query context. And other thing is an argument to DAX function or a report filter on a row or column heading. You can see, right? If I'm just filtering on here, the view, the functional or a row filter here, then this form your, what I can say, filter context. In the row context is current filter and the calculated columns. Let's say if I'm just calculating a column here, if I'm putting my functional in a 10%, and I'm doing a calculation here of 10% for each of this value, then that is called a, what you can call a row context. So this thing we need to know about it. Okay, and here also I said that the differences between a measure and a calculated measure. A calculated measure which holds a memory or which occupies a memory of your table and which is available as a column in your Power Query. You can see, right, the denotes as sumx. Sumx is nothing but your iteration function, iteration, go row by row, and this calculated the sum of sales where your country name equal to US, and it will took only the country name of US and then it aggregate price with the quantity. That's it. And this is nothing but a filter context, as we say that already. What about the implicit and the explicit filter? And you can see the implicit color, 1, 2, 3, 4. One defines the row, the color of your product. Two defines your column, right? And three defines your